Today's word is stupendous.
You need some encouragement.
We really love listening to you guys.
You need some inspiration.
Love your podcast. Wonderfully inspiring as I think about my marriage.
Stupendous marriage encouragement.
You're listening to the Stupendous Marriage Show.
Hey there, welcome to the Stupendous Marriage Show. I'm Stu Gray.
Hey, I'm Lisa Gray.
This is a show where we answer your marriage questions. You can send them to us on air at stupendousmarriage.com. You can also text them our way, 1-615-592-1060, or look for the big blue button at our website at stupendousmarriage.com. You know, we've been doing something different, though, for the past couple shows. We've been talking about stupendous steps to have a better marriage. 2 shows ago, we talked about working on yourself to have a better marriage. Last show, we talked about building a vision for your marriage. And this week, we thought we would give you another step to a stupendous marriage.
So this week, we're going to talk about teamwork. Yay! Teamwork is kind of a cheesy word that you hear a lot in, obviously, sports, but also in business atmospheres and stuff like that. I honestly believe it is a great word to use in your marriage. When you see your spouse as someone that you are on the same team with, working towards the same goal with, I think you have more grace for them. I think you can have better communication with them and really work towards your goals better.
It's not the most lovey-dovey romantic word in the whole wide world.
Right.
And you do think of other things in business or sports when you think of teamwork, but our marriage relationship, one, is a relationship, but we do have elements of being on the same team and attacking and getting things done together. And it's just something that we've stood on for our marriage, and we think it's super helpful. So the word might not be sexy, but the principle really, really works. And our Bible verse that we're standing on is Ecclesiastes 4, 9, and 10. 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble.
I know for us and our journey, it really was changing the way we saw things in this part of our marriage that really made some huge changes. When we were walking through your struggle with pornography, for the longest time, it was something that was between us. And we would sit there and argue about this thing. And I really fought you because of that thing. It was like, well, you're doing this and you're doing that, or you're not doing this and you're not doing that. And when I finally realized that it wasn't even anything that you were intentionally doing or not doing, but it was something that was trying to come against us and against our marriage, then I kind of changed the thought process. What, instead of fighting you about this thing between us, what if I stand beside you, arm in arm, facing it together, and literally say, get away from my marriage. You cannot have him. You cannot have us. And how can I help you win this fight?
It's us versus the thing, not me versus you. We have an enemy. It's not our spouse. And when you can link arms and attack the thing, both moving forward together, you can cover more ground that way. That way you're not tearing each other down. It's a perspective shift. It allows for you to communicate better and more lovingly towards one another because your spouse isn't the enemy. Your spouse isn't the problem. You're trying to then stand together and solve the problem instead of beating up on your spouse.
Now, I know that is not always the case. You know, if your husband does leave the dishes in the sink all the time or your wife leaves the toothpaste out, obviously we're not talking about everyday small stuff. That's not the devil working through your spouse, you know, doing the toilet paper roll the wrong way or whatever the case may be. We're talking about big things where there is actual warfare happening, where there is something trying to cause division. And having division in your marriage is so difficult. We have been there. We know that. And fighting against that thing that's trying to cause division is a great way to just break free from it. Standing with your spouse, being their number one fan, their number one advocate, no matter what's going on, and just trying to help them win the battle, especially when it comes to addictions, when it comes to things of their past that maybe they're still trying to work through. Standing together in marriage, facing things, is all about teamwork.
We'll talk more about teamwork and compromise coming up. Marriage researcher and author John Gottman has done so many studies on married couples. He's got it down to a science on what makes couples thrive and what makes them get divorced. And he and his team have arrived at the number 69. And that number is 69% of problems and arguments in marriages are perpetual or unsolvable. So about 30% you can solve, the over-under toilet paper thing and the silly things. But there are problems that come up and you rehash them and you bring them up in different ways and maybe different words, but they're a perpetual problem. So what do you do? How do you get to the heart of that? How do you navigate that together as a couple instead of getting gridlocked, which he says happens if you've got this perpetual problem and the more it comes up, you just get stuck. How do you get through that?
Well, I think it becomes the elephant in the room.
Sure it does.
We kind of reference it as we keep going around this mountain. It's just like the Israelites. You just keep going around the mountain and going around the mountain. Not that you're always going to come to this huge solution to where everything's perfect, happily ever after, but if you can get to a place that you can go, hey, how do we figure out how to stop going around this mountain together? Is it something that is you're being triggered with from your childhood, something that happened before? Is it something that you've said to me that has now caused a wound that maybe hasn't been healed, hasn't really been mended? You know, what is the root of the problem?
Why are you having this disagreement? You have to figure that out for yourself. And outside of the disagreement that you're currently having, the perpetual problem, stepping away from it and going, why do I respond like this? And let me tell you why I respond like this. And let me let you in on my inner life, my inner workings of my brain. And
Right.
here's what's going on. When we talk about money, I feel less than because I was never a good money manager and I blew it really badly. And my parents made fun of me for spending lots of money. I don't know what it is. I'm just making that up as I go. It could be that whenever a money conversation comes up, you go, "Whoa!" in your way. So you have to let your spouse know what money means to you. Your spouse needs to talk to you about what money means to them. And then you have to figure out how to communicate together about that money issue with grace and humor and dance well together. Because right now it's a broken dance and a broken communication. But if you can get into the heart of what the difficult perpetual argument is, what that topic is, get to the heart of it, what it means to you, you can then share that with your spouse, and then you learn how to communicate about it together.
It's kind of thinking about the 10,000 foot view. Instead of being in the middle of your moment in that specific topic, talking about money, instead of being in that moment, what is it that maybe you were saying to your spouse or they are saying to you over and over again in your marriage that causes you to respond a certain way or causes your spouse to respond a certain way? What is causing the flare up to happen to where you can actually treat it, you can deal with it instead of continuing to go around the mountain?
And then after you figure out the heart and the dance that you're going to do, there is some compromise that does happen. Compromise is a part of marriage, and it's something that you learn to do. Some of us are better at it than others, but it is part of the relationship. And if you have a problem that you can't solve, somebody has to give a little, and the other person needs to give a little, and see if that's helpful in the situation. And you just keep negotiating and renegotiating as you move forward to figure out how then you do life around and with this thing that's not going to be solved necessarily. And you laugh about it. You've got to laugh about it together. If you take yourself so seriously, you're only going to be biting and nipping at each other and taking it personally and hurting each other's feelings through the whole thing.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine telling the story that in their marriage, what they do is, let's say it's even just where we're going to dinner, right? And this is a conversation that you have often, and it has become where it's an argument. One of you wants to go this place and one of you wants to go that place. And she said, you know, what we've decided to do is truly pick our battles. Is this really important to me? Well, no, it's not. You know, so let my husband pick where we're going to go to dinner from now on. And I'll pick which movie we're going to go see. You know what I'm saying? Like, pick your battles. Really think about if it's worth fighting for. Is it worth fighting over this subject? Or maybe can you step back and show grace to your spouse and go, you know what? You make this decision. I'm behind you. Yeah, I don't know that I really completely understand, but it's not that important to me. And it's obviously very important to you. So you take it and run with it, and I'm right behind you.
It's these elements of teamwork and working together towards a solution and not fighting one another that help move your marriage forward. There's a spiritual element to the fights that we have. In Ephesians 6:12, it says we're not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers, authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers of the dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. There's a spiritual element to this. The devil doesn't like marriages that succeed and are doing well. And if we don't acknowledge that, not that there is a demon around every bush, but there is an element that does come against us and our communication in the marriages that we have to at least acknowledge that, and going to God to help us say, hey, God, we're not understanding this. We're standing together. We're praying to you. Please give us a way forward is always, always a good idea.
And in that, I think making sure you're not allowing offense and division to take a root in your marriage. If you are constantly offended over your spouse, you have got to stop it. There are things that you love about them and loved about them when you got married. Go back to those things. What you focus on grows. We talked about that before. So focus on the positive things, whatever they may be, that your spouse is doing, so that the spirit of offense or the spirit of division does not take root, because it really can. I've seen it so many times where people just don't like each other anymore. And no matter what the other person is doing, it's wrong and it's offensive. And that is a spirit.
These principles that we believe makes a marriage stupendous, the working on yourself, the building vision, the teamwork element, they all build on one another, and they also are hand in hand with one another. If you work on yourself, you can understand why you respond to a perpetual problem.
Right.
If you work on yourself, you can figure out how to stand together with your spouse better than if you don't know anything about yourself and you haven't thought it all the way through for yourself. How can you stand with them and battle the thing in front of you? If you don't know that money is an issue for you, you don't have that tool to bring to your marriage. Having a vision plays into teamwork as well. If you have something that you're aiming for and that you're looking forward to in your marriage, when you have a vision and you're going for it together, it gives your marriage passion and purpose and drive.
When you think about the pivotal days in your marriage, your wedding day, the day of your child being born, those are days, those are things that are happening in your marriage that you really generally work as a team towards, right? So when you are having your first child, you guys are working together to get the nursery ready, and you're working together to do the registry, and you're doing all these things together to be able to accomplish the goal of preparing for this special event that's coming. What if you thought about all the bigger situations in your marriage that way? Instead of, I'm against you, you're against me. Hey, oh my gosh, we need to put our child through college. Okay, let's stand together and figure out how we're going to do this. Again, it's changing that mentality of, well, I want to do it this way, and you don't want to do it, and I don't care what you think, but I want to do this. And whoa, stop, time out. Let's come together and work together like we have before. You know, when we did those fun things, let's take that same attitude and really try to think through these difficult situations with a teamwork mentality.
We had a pastor who said early in our relationship, he said, it's win-win or no deal ever in marriage. Mm-hmm. So finding those win-win situations, or you keep going back to the drawing board until you figure out how to navigate it together.
Yeah.
So that's this week's Stupendous Step Towards a Better Marriage. If you want to send us your marriage questions, yes, we are going to get back to marriage questions on the show, and we would love to answer your question. Will you send us your email on air at stupendousmarriage.com? We would love to hear your question there. Or 1-615-592-1060. You can text it to us.
Don't forget about the blue button on the website at stupendousmarriage.com.
See you next time.
Bye. Yeah.
Like the show? Like the show.
Yeehaw.
Share the podcast. Tell another couple.
Hold on. Hold up.
So marriage researcher and... marriage researcher.
Author.
Did that make any sense? No.
We're fumbling, but we're making it, honey.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start over. Yeah.
Like the show. Share the podcast. Tell your married friends.